I think we're going to go ahead and get started with the study session so we can stay on time.
We're missing Young and
Kenny's here.
yeah, he's here, but not at his seat.
What happened to everybody? I'll call the meeting to order. Let's start with the roll call.
Mayor Scott Anderson,
Here.
Vice Mayor Bobby Buckley,
Here.
Councilmember Chuck Bongiovanni,
Here.
Member Kenny Buckland,
Here.
Councilmember Monty Lyons,
Here.
Councilmember Jim Torgerson.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Councilmember Kaprowski will be here at about 5:30, so you know. We have 3 items on the agenda for study session tonight. First is a presentation and discussion from Development Services on text amendments related to the definition of habitable, adaptive reuse, and construction during summertime hours. That's quite a broad spectrum of things to talk about.
Mayor, Council, yes, it is. A lot of this is due directly, well, it all is due directly to legislation that has been passed. So I will start and go over the construction noise. Mine is the shortest part. Ashley and Veronica will follow me with the much more detailed and knowledgeable part. The request is to amend Gilbert's Muni Code, our noise section is in the Muni Code, to align with the state statute by allowing concrete pouring to start 1 hour prior to construction activities. So the way the amendment reads now is we allow construction between the hours of 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. year-round. With the new legislation, cities and towns must now allow concrete pouring to begin 1 hour before general construction. So the entire change to our Muni Code would just be to allow concrete pouring to shift from 5 a.m. to 4 a.m. That is really the extent of text amendment when it comes to the construction noise. Whoops.
Any questions from the council?
You just have to conform.
Yeah.
We don't have a choice, so thank you.
Yeah.
I told you I had the easy one.
Let's move on to the next one we have to do.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is Z2507, and it's related to our definition for the word habitable, essentially. So we're seeking to amend Section 2.0 of the Land Development Code just to update that definition. It really relates to the amendment that we did last year for accessory dwelling units, so I'll walk through that really quickly. So House Bill 2720 from 2024 required that municipalities adopt regulations that allowed for accessory dwelling units, and we had to adopt those regulations by January 1st of 2025, which the town did complete. We did that in December of 2024. We amended the code to allow for accessory dwelling units. And what that legislation said was that accessory dwelling units that is 75% of the gross floor area of the single-family dwelling on the same lot or parcel would be allowed, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. And so what really hung us up with our existing definition is that gross floor area, because the legislation also defined what gross floor, or it also provided a definition of gross floor area. And it states that it means the interior habitable area of a single-family dwelling unit or accessory dwelling unit. And so we amended our code to allow for accessory dwelling units, but did not update our definition of habitable. Prior to this update, the definition of habitable was primarily used for commercial businesses. We used the term livable as it related to residential. My clicker's no longer advancing me. There we go. I went way too far, and now I'm in Veronica's presentation, so I'm going to slowly click backwards. Okay. So our existing definition of habitable is the one on the top. It's a space in a building for living, sleeping, eating, or cooking. Bathrooms, toilet rooms, closets, halls, storage, or utility spaces are not considered habitable. So it excludes a number of things that that are in residential dwelling units. And so as we've started to implement this, it's really impacted our calculations for how large these accessory dwelling units can be, because we're having to accept out the square footage for bathrooms, closets, halls, and storage. And so we simply want to update that definition to include those spaces. So the new definition would be space in a building used for the purposes including living, working, sleeping, sanitation, eating, cooking, and then conditioned storage, recreation, or any combination of the above. And so that aligns a little bit better as we start to implement the accessory dwelling units and the square footage requirements from the legislature. So this what did go to Planning Commission last month. They did recommend approval of this, and so council will see this on an upcoming council meeting for action. But tonight we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to address any questions that you may have.
Councilmember Bongiovanni.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you go back one slide? Okay. Cooking. Know that a good amount of people use these units for their elderly parents, which may or may not, because of dementia or so, may not want to have these stoves on. What's the criteria for that? Do they have to have a stove but have it unplugged, or can they not have that at all?
Nope, that's a great question. The accessory dwelling unit text amendment that we adopted in December of last year actually does not require cooking facilities. This is just saying if you have it, we're going to count it towards the square footage.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
So again, we're having to do something for the geniuses at the legislature? Sorry, gotta get it in.
For the record.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. As you may recall, last year, at the last legislative session, there was House Bill 2297, which was the adaptive reuse of multifamily development bill. What it did require is that all cities and towns with a population of 150,000 people or more are required to update their codes to allow multifamily or adaptive reuse on all parcels that are between 1 acre and 20 acres in size that are commercial, office, or mixed-use type of development. We did process the text amendment. It was approved in December of last year. In this current legislative session, they have gone back to make some changes to that bill. Most of those changes were clarifying changes. I have listed here some of those items that have remained the same. Again, applies to all cities and towns that are 150,000, with a population of 150,000 or more. It applies to parcels that are between 1 and 20 acres, that are commercial, office, and mixed-use developments. The heights and setbacks of the buildings are considered non-conforming, and they may demolition portions of the building. What have changed with this particular bill is that previously we were looking, or we were counting, the number of buildings that would be eligible for development under this bill. We are now looking at the number of parcels. So we'd be looking at parcels versus buildings. And we're also looking at, before there was a cap, and now it's sort of a floor, where we would have to allow at least 10% of all parcels that meet that criteria to be able to develop as multifamily or adaptive reuse without a public hearing or a use permit. As you might recall, there were 3 10% provisions in the previous bill, and those have remained the same. Those provisions were at least 10% of the commercial office mixed-use buildings would be eligible. We may exclude up to 10% of those if we have determined they are in commercial or employment hubs. And then if a developer decides to move forward with the adaptive reuse or multifamily, they'd have to designate at least 10% of those dwelling units for low income, moderate income, or some combination of the two for 20 years from the date of initial occupation. So we went back and we took a look at all of the parcels that would be eligible under the new requirements going from buildings to parcels. And this is a little snapshot here of what that would look like. We found there to be 781 parcels within the town that met that criteria, which means that we would have to allow at least 78 parcels within the town to develop under those criteria that I just went over. Again, we are still allowed to exempt certain areas, certain commercial and employment areas within the town. We had actually designated these 4 areas last year when we adopted the amendments. What we have done here, though, is we've taken a look at the number of parcels within those areas and have found that we are still within the maximum 10% exemption. And we can exempt up to 78 parcels, and we are still able to maintain those commercial and employment hub areas as exemptions. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Oh, I'm sorry, I do want to let you know that this particular text amendment is on your agenda for the public hearing later on tonight.
Councilmember Torgerson.
Just because technicalities are what they are. If 10% is 78.1, are we rounding up to 10%? Are we allowed to do that? Or are we going to find ourselves one shy somewhere?
Mayor, Councilmember Torgerson, that's actually a really good question. And that's something that we did think about as we were looking at it. And we opted in this case, because it's 781, 10% would be 78.1. We opted to round down to 78.
My question, though, is technically that's not 10%. Are we going to find ourselves at odds with the state legislature again? That's my concern. Maybe that's a Chris question.
A couple of things, if I could. So when it comes to the exempt areas, there's a max of 10%. So going with 78, we're still in compliance with that because you had noted it's maybe just under 10%, so we're good in terms of the exempt areas. As far as the eligible areas, that is a minimum of 10%, so if we say we're starting at 78, we can go up from there because it is a minimum.
Understood. Thank you for clarifying for me.
Yep.
I'm inhibited today.
Just today?
That's it.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 2 tonight is discussion concerning the Arizona Supreme Court case entitled In Re Sponsal. Chris?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're here to talk about the impacts of a recent Arizona Supreme Court case that it will have on our prosecutor's office, like every other prosecuting agency across the state. We've just got one slide here. I can figure out how to do it. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Wolf, who is our town prosecutor. I'm going to do a quick introduction of the case, and I'll turn it over to him to talk about what the impacts of this case mean for our office and what our request will be for the council. So this is a decision that was issued just last month by the Arizona Supreme Court. It was a disciplinary decision involving a former Maricopa County prosecutor, and she was disciplined for violations of the Arizona Rules of Professional Conduct. So this was an appeal to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upheld that discipline, which was, I believe, a 2-year suspension. And in that, there was a lot of language in that decision that addressed the ethical obligations of prosecutors in charging criminal cases under the Arizona Rules of Professional Conduct. And now Jeff Wolf, our town prosecutor, will talk more about that impact.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, Mayor and Council. So yes, this decision really emphasized with some of their language in the case decision from the Supreme Court itself, the importance of reviewing video. Now, as the body-worn camera and fleet program here in Gilbert have grown, the amount of video that we have to review has grown significantly over the last couple of years. And the way that this decision impacts our community and really all prosecutors is that there needs to be significant time moving forward invested in reviewing all of this evidence and reviewing all of this video. That, of course, brings into question resources, and our request, so I don't bury the lead here, the request is that the council approve two FTEs, two new prosecutors for our office. The reason for that is that we need more time to be reviewing all of this evidence, and the prosecutors need to spend more time in the cases. There, of course, are some alternatives. The resources, the lack of resources is certainly an issue for all of the offices in the community, and different offices are handling it different ways, but some of the alternatives involve not prosecuting certain types of crimes. There are some agencies that have gone with that route, and some have chosen not to go to certain court hearings, have the state not be represented at all court hearings in their jurisdictions. That is a way to get time and resources back for the prosecutor's office. But the reason for my recommendation is that I don't believe that is what we should expect. I don't think that's what our community expects. I believe that justice is best served if we are addressing all types of cases and that we do appear at all court hearings. That is the reason for my recommendation, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions about the case or my recommendation.
Questions? Councilmember Bongiovanni?
Thank you, Mayor. So let's say there's a video camera in a police car, and for the first hour, it's just completely empty, no one's in the back seat. Can someone else look at the video until the point where the suspect gets in the car, or does the attorney have to sit there for the whole hour?
The beauty of Axon is that at least the attorney can put it on double speed, maybe even quadruple speed, and zoom through that. But the reality is that everything that happens in the office falls under the prosecutor's license, falls under mine and, in fact, Chris's license. We would ultimately have to be the ones who review that and sign off on it that everything had been done correctly. So it really wouldn't be feasible to have someone else take up that time because the attorney would still have to review it.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Lyons?
Thank you, Mayor. It's my understanding that in this particular case that the defense used the argument that a lack of resources was one of the reasons that they did not look at all the film, correct?
That is correct.
And the Supreme Court rejected that argument. Is that correct or fair to say?
That is fair to say. Thank you, Councilmember. And just to give a little bit more detail on that, they specifically pointed to if time and resources were at issue, then it fell to the head of the office, myself, and then by extension, Chris, to manage that workload and find a place for the work to be appropriately done. It simply, in layman's terms, wasn't an excuse that there wasn't the time and resources.
And in addition to that, in our particular municipality, we actually utilize more cameras in our field work than maybe typically expected across the metro area. Is that correct?
That is correct. I've had some conversations with other agencies after this decision came out, as well as APAC, which is our legislative board that advises prosecutor agencies all over the state. And at least in the East Valley, we are the only agency that uses a fleet camera. And when I say fleet, what I mean is that we have 3 cameras on every police car. We have one on the front, one in the back, and one in the cage. I think this is a great resource for PD, and it's a great resource for us as prosecutors because everything is captured. This is good information and good evidence to have, but it does mean that we have more to review than most of the neighboring agencies.
So in addition to this, part of this arose from an overcharging or an ethical lapse on that prosecutor's part. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And so do you have in place within our office the ability to address and mitigate that type of overreach if a situation like that came up?
Yes, absolutely. And the presentation from our office and from myself and Chris on this is focused on the ability to review all of that evidence specifically because although those other issues that you just brought up were a major point in this case and other rules that she violated, I do not believe that we are in danger of violating those rules because we do have mechanisms in place, and I don't believe that's a concern with our office at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other items? Vice Mayor?
I just want to confirm, and we chatted about this, I think, earlier, that the two new prosecutors that will be in charge of reviewing all of these videos that need to be reviewed, they are, they're prosecutors, they're educated just like you are, and they'll be reporting to you, correct? And where you won't have to be doing all the reviewing. I just want to confirm that, you know, that you are, they're relaying to you, but they're authorized to be doing that by you, correct?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Kelly, could we have Kelly come up and talk about the financial impact of what we're talking about?
Thank you, Mayor.
Again, just to emphasize again, this is like we were talking about with the state legislature. These are mandates that we don't have any control over, but you're going to hear the impact.
Yes, Mayor and Council, as you're aware, the fiscal 26 budget is extremely tight with our ongoing funding. And so there's not at this time ongoing funding to be able to hire 2 full-time employees. As an alternative, what will be coming to you at a future meeting is authorization for contingency to hire 2 limited term agreement employees or LTAs. Those use one-time funding. It's not ideal, but it will give us the opportunity to have some time to evaluate what the budget needs to look like in fiscal 27, where the resources need to be best used, and also some time to be able to see what our sales tax looks like, if there's been enough growth to be able to have additional ongoing funding for those priorities.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councilmember Torgerson?
If I'm getting this right, basically, 1 officer is equal to 4 cameras because there's 3 on the vehicle, 1 on him. So they've got to go through 4 times the hours. We find a little bit of tech here to help out, so maybe they've got a screen with 4 things going on, and as he said, 2 or 3 exits, so, because what we're doing is we're actually spending attorney time, an actual attorney at an actual attorney's thing, salary, to review something there'll be a lot of dead space in. And I don't want it to, take away somebody's, something might exonerate them. Forget making them guilty, it might exonerate them. I want them to have that opportunity, but can we do something to, AI is not there yet, but can we do something to expedite the process? Because it's 4 to 1 hours.
Mayor and Councilmember Torgerson, you are correct that on most cases, there are 4 cameras, at least while you're en route. So our officers, when they're en route to a call, they will activate the camera. But once they arrive, unless it's in the street, they'll turn off the camera cars, and at that point, it's their body cam only. Also keep in mind, on some cases, we may have our drone footage as well, if it's an aerial deployment of our drone, where we may have camera footage from that. So there are multiple camera sources. We do our best to manage that, and when it's not needed for recording, we will deactivate it. Sometimes they may forget to turn off the camera, and it may run for an hour. A lot of those times, it's administrative, and they don't belong in evidence, and it doesn't belong to a case. But if it's in a crime scene and the camera's running, you may have an hour of dead time. I'll refer to Chris on the use of AI. There are some tools that we can utilize, because there's 2 things you're looking at, both audio and video, that they've got to attest that they've reviewed that. Audio-wise, there are some features that make it very easy, but I don't know the court stance on AI use of the audio side, but then you also have the video side, where if I have dead air, so to speak, I've got a video, there's no sound, we can see a transcription on the video to see if there's any sound. If so, it'll pick it up in the transcription, but they still have to account for visually seeing, did anything happen, did anything occur? That answer your question? So I think that as far as using AI, that's something between us and the courts and potential future cases. We'll see what they allow us to do, because there are a lot of tools out there that can synthesize and highlight action, movement, voice, and it's a matter of what the courts will allow us to utilize.
Councilmember Lyons, do you have a question?
I did. I just need some clarification, please, Mayor. Chris, I think this might be for you, or it may be for Kelly, both of you. My concern with this is that I want to make sure we're prosecuting the things that come before our town. You know, we have a reputation for law and order. I want to ensure that's maintained. You are requesting 2 heads. Don't know how you arrived at that, and want to know if you could give me a little background. Do you think that's adequate for what you're requesting, given the breadth of what you may have to review?
Thank you, Councilmember Lyons. I'm going to defer to Jeff on this because this is a number that he kind of sat down and calculated and determined it's not ideal. Ideal would be more, but we think we can make it work, and he'll explain why.
Okay.
Thank you, Council. And Chris just alluded to it, but that's correct. So in reviewing this, I was trying to take into account everything that is expected of us as prosecutors and admittedly fiscal responsibility and what we can realistically do. As Chris referred to, ideally it would be more, but we kind of came to the conclusion that with 2, although it may slow down some of our process, it may have to continue a case an extra time so we have more time to look at something. We believe that we can maintain service levels. So it was about finding a balance where it was maybe not ideal, but we could still really address everything in our community and keep up everything that we currently do, even if it did slow it down a little bit, rather than reaching the extremes like I spoke about earlier that some agencies are doing where they're just stopping certain kinds of things, certain crimes altogether. This seemed to be the middle ground that I believe we can do it with 2, even if it's a little slower.
Okay, so if I understand what you're saying, you basically took a look at the workload and figured that may slow some things down, but this would be adequate to do it without lowering the threshold of the things that you pursue to prosecute. For instance, like shoplifting or something like that, where, you know, some municipalities are not going forward in prosecuting those things because they don't have the time to do it. You're not getting the bang for the buck. Is that fair to say?
Correct. That's exactly correct.
All right. I would just ask that you guys take a hard look at this, because I understand you're developing this for Kelly for next year's budget. Let's make sure that we don't sell ourselves short moving forward, that you do have the adequate amount of heads that you have so that we don't decrease our amount of prosecution of the items that we need to ensure the community's safe, okay?
Certainly. Thank you, Council.
Member Bongiovanni?
Thank you, Mayor. I hate comparing us to other cities because I know we're the best, but what are some of the other cities around us doing? I mean, the ones that don't want to, that do want to continue to prosecute crimes, I mean, what are they doing? Do we know?
So most of the other agencies that I spoke to, which is pretty much the entire East Valley, have something that they don't do. It's either certain types of crimes, suspended license, some shoplifting or certain drug offenses that they just do not prosecute for resource reasons. The other thing that is common is that they do not go to every court date. I don't believe there was a single agency I reached out to that does everything that we do. Everybody gave up something. Now, some of them are still looking to hire, but they would concede going to arraignments at the very least. Well, that means the case starts without the state having a voice, without the victim having a voice. And they say, well, if they don't resolve it early, then we'll at least get to it later. And that weeds out some of the cases because they'll either resolve them or the person doesn't show up, and then we'll deal with it when they come back on a warrant. Everybody found some balance, but I didn't find anyone who has, and certainly nobody with Fleet, but that goes to every court date the way that we do. There's not a single docket that our court has that we don't have a state representative at, or, you know, state representative, not to get back to the legislature, but a representative from the state from our office at, and we prosecute every single type of crime that comes into our office.
So are these just cases that we're prosecuting, or what about cases that other municipalities are prosecuting, but Gilbert police are involved? Who's watching those videos? Is it our attorneys or is it the other city attorneys?
So just for clarification, so if Gilbert officers pull over somebody in Chandler, is that the?
Or if there's something happening in Chandler, but it started in Gilbert and they cross lines, and who's watching those videos, or do those videos have to be watched?
So those videos have to be watched, but wherever the case is being prosecuted, that's whose responsibility it is to review all that evidence.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Buckland.
Thank you, Mayor. So I trust that you'll heed Councilmember Lyons' advice and make sure before you do submit, you're actually asking for what we need to not slip prosecution of crimes. Very important. Gilbert, like you said, has always been known for prosecution. It's a very safe city because of the partnerships we have with the community, with the prosecutor's office, and we get it done, right? We don't reject things. Enough said there. My question for you, and I don't know if you have the answer or not. Our felony cases that are going over to Maricopa County Attorney's Office, you're not prosecuting. They are. Do we know if there's an impact to or a risk to our cases at MCSO for those felonies?
So MCSO, and forgive me for using a bit of a sports analogy, college football programs who get in trouble often self-sanction. Maricopa County kind of did that since April Sponsel was their employee. They put policies in place sort of as a precursor to the case, hoping that it might for some of the blowback. And so they have redaction policies saying that the prosecutors have to review all of this. Now, one reason that I don't think that my opinion is it doesn't fix it just to put a policy in place is that unless you have the resources and put people in place to actually comply with those policies, it's in language only. I don't know who they've hired. I don't know their ability to comply with that policy, but they have put a policy in place that all of that information needs to be reviewed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Jeff. Chris, did you have something more to add?
No, just to answer Councilmember Torgerson's question, or just to add on to what Chief Stolberg said about emerging technologies. That's something that, looking at across the town, we certainly will with the prosecutor's office when they not just are reviewing to make charging decisions, but also when they have to cut body-worn camera, redact body-worn camera to provide to the defendants. As well as on the PD records side, they have a number of employees all day long looking at body-worn camera for public records requests. We're constantly looking at, is there AI technology that can help? One thing, even if you've got, a body-worn camera running in a vehicle, say it's a DUI, the suspect's outside, a lot of times there might not be video, but there's audio. There's always things coming in on the radio. There's PII, that type of information. So sometimes if it's a dead video, you may think it's easy to just do fast forward, but if there is audio there, even something that they've got to listen for and pay attention, so that takes time. But we are looking at technologies right now with court rules and court cases. They haven't caught up. So the question is, would a court accept that? We don't know yet, at least in Arizona, but we are looking at that and seeing what we can do.
Councilmember Bongiovanni.
Thank you, Mayor. Hearing that, I want to pile on with Councilmember Lyons and Buckland. Let's find out exactly how many you guys really need and get that for next budget.
I appreciate that, and we absolutely will do that. And just kind of, Jeff mentioned this, that we do prosecute in Gilbert all cases that come before us. And I've heard personally from defense attorneys, and I know our other our prosecutors have as well, that they tell their clients not to commit crimes in Gilbert because we don't go easy on them. We think all crimes should be prosecuted to protect the community, to protect the victims. We treat defendants fairly, but that's the reputation we have for reason. Why the community we have is the way it is.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris, for your presentation, and Jeff. Our last presentation is presentation and discussion from the town clerk's office related to the application, interview, and appointment process for boards, commissions, and committees. Who's going to lead this off?
Good evening, Mary Anderson,
Okay.
Council. I will be starting the presentation. Judy Martinez, Deputy Town Clerk, here with Ashley Doring, our Town Clerk Specialist. All right, I'm just going to make sure there's not a delay here. There we go. We have a habit of over-clicking, I apologize. This item is coming to you at the request of council members for an application and evaluation process overhaul for boards and commission selection. And the purpose this evening is to review the current procedures, integrate council's insights, and seek council feedback and general direction. As a reminder, per town code, the board and commission members are appointed by the council, serving at its pleasure. There is a note of commitment to diverse recruitment in the town code. The appointees must be town residents. They must be sworn into office prior to assumption of their duties, adhere to open meeting law and other laws. Their role is advisory in nature unless specified otherwise in law. Their duties are defined in town code, bylaws, and sometimes in state statute, depending on the board. They receive no compensation, and there are attendance requirements per code. The specific process itself is not defined in code, and this allows for adaptability, to use new software and technology, and also to incorporate the guidance from the council. Examples of recent changes in the last few years was that we went to a new software program that the town was already utilizing from another department. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we also incorporated the one-way video interviews, and the council at that time did decide to make those mandatory. They really thought that they added value. But they went from 3 questions down to 1 just for efficiency. And then we've also updated the application sets routinely. Next, Ashley will summarize the current application, screening, and appointment process.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Continuing where Judy left off, the process begins 2 months before the appointment date, which will be outlined in the timeline below. The application typically takes 2 to 3 weeks. As mentioned before, a one-way video interview with 1 general question is required. The purpose of the interview is to introduce to the council the applicant in conjunction with their online application. After closing the application, the interviews are shared with the council for individual scoring, allowing 2 to 3 weeks for review. The scores are then tallied by the clerk's office. Interviews are scheduled based on cumulative scores. Currently, we schedule 2 times the number of openings for interviews. For example, if we have 2 openings, we will schedule 4 interviews. Agendas are published about 8 days prior to the meeting, and we like to inform those being interviewed and not selected for interviews prior to publishing. And this accounts for a 2-month-long process.
Thank you, Ashley. The interviews are conducted in executive session pursuant to the statute referenced above, and it's also noted on the agendas. The statute allows for discussion and consideration of appointments of public officers and appointees to be conducted in executive session. The statute does require the option to have the interviews done in a public meeting, which is offered to the applicants, but typically declined. During the executive session, applicants are interviewed, then discussions and considerations take place. However, the appointments are made by a majority vote of you, the council, during a public meeting. Unlike board and commission member removals and resignations, which are added as consent items, appointments of board and commission members are listed in the administrative items section of the agenda. They can be added to the consent calendar or voted on separately in the administrative items section to allow for discussion.
After the request was received, the clerk's office asked for individual feedback from the council regarding their general preferences. The results were compiled, and a summary of the responses is being shared with you tonight for the first time. We appreciate your feedback and always welcome the opportunity to improve the process for both you and the applicants. We will offer a brief summary of what we learned based on the specific areas of the process. Regarding the process of interview recommendation, the majority of the council thought the current process was sufficient, with the entire council having equal say and interviews being based on cumulative scores. Others indicated that staff and/or council liaison recommended the applicants for an in-person interview. We learned that the entire council thought that the staff liaisons could provide valuable insights when screening applicants.
And with respect to the application content, the majority of the council found the application sufficient as is, but it was noted that there would be or could be potential gaps of not addressing the needs of the open seats specifically or the specific board's needs, and not considering diversity of experience versus general skill sets. We would like to emphasize that the application questions can be updated at any time. Our current application system does have some limitations, especially if we are opening 2 or 3 boards at the same time. So it gets a little tricky with wording the application questions for each specific board. And I can elaborate more on that if you'd like, but one recommendation is to incorporate more board-specific content into the video interviews. That platform offers more flexibility and it's configured separately for each board. So that may be a helpful tool in being able to ask more board-specific questions. Regarding the video interview component, most council members indicated that the existing format with a single question was adequate. However, several noted that the video interview did not add value or they could benefit from additional questions. And a reminder that the video interviews are used along with the application to determine who gets an in-person interview. We learned that the majority of you felt that we should continue the current process of interviewing 2 times the number of openings. So again, if we had 4 openings, our typical process would be to interview the top 8 ranked applicants based on the council's cumulative scores. Others indicated that more applicants should be interviewed with longer interview times. There was a suggestion that the staff and/or council liaisons recommend the appointments via an agenda packet. And it was also suggested that there be a cap for the number of interviews when there were more than 4 openings. So a cap of only an additional 50% versus a 100% addition. So in other words, for those 4 applicants, we would typically now interview the top 8. It would be the top 6 versus 8 interviews. The clerk's office is ready to accommodate any council directives. There are a few scheduling considerations to keep in mind. Expanding in-person interviews would require additional meeting time, with longer video interviews extending the review process. It would be helpful to open the application online earlier than 2 months before the appointment dates to allow for staff liaison review time, which requires a commitment from both the council and staff liaisons as well.
Based off the council's feedback, we have a few general recommendations. Since the council all agreed that staff liaison's input was valuable, we would recommend adding staff liaison review period before the information is given for review. We will also seek ways to reflect the needs of each board based on specific duties and/or current membership needs. Again, we would suggest adding additional questions to the interview portion as the program allows for more flexibility. We heard from you that there should be a consistent clarity of interview and executive session protocols for both council and applicants. We also heard that all council input should be equally valued during the considerations, again noting that all council members vote on the applicants during a public meeting. If desired, we're happy to provide you with some alternative questions for your part of the interview process and are happy to refine any steps as required. Thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to your feedback.
Council input. Councilmember Buckland.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks to you both for that presentation. I had asked for this, so I appreciate the due diligence everybody put in, the council put in, doing the surveys. I think that the recommendations are sufficient. Kind of where I was with it, what I'm seeing in recommendations will help. And one is that it's our staff that works with these boards and needs to be able to collaborate with the boards. So I think that that's highly valuable, that you guys have input to who's on the boards. I also think that'll help build relationships as we move along. And then secondly, the video, I don't want to create a tremendous amount more work on our staff, but I do want to have an integrous process that, because we have citizens that are doing this, they're volunteering to help us, and it needs to really be a good, solid process. I think different questions in the video, what I've noticed in my short time on council is that ultimately they give us a video that answers the questions we ask, and then they come to the interview and we ask them the same exact questions. So that's why I felt it was just a bit of redundancy. I'll leave it at that.
Councilmember Bongiovanni.
Thank you, Mayor. We all have boards that we are liaisons to and oversee. I personally feel that we know our boards and the needs of our boards. And having to be part of the process for other boards, I think it's redundant, to be very honest with you. To have equal say on who's on a board, I think is not effective for that board. You know, I know on Parks and Rec who we're interviewing and who would fit in that board, just as everyone here would also in the board that they're liaisons to. You know, if I have someone who the rest of the council loves, but I know just wouldn't fit personality-wise, it doesn't make sense to put them on that board or commission. So I would be for, and also I like the idea of the staff also participating. I'd rather see staff participating and then the liaison doing the interviews, rather than having the whole council involved in all of that. Now, the one advantage of having the whole council involved is if someone doesn't make it on one board and we think that they would do great on our board, we will at least have a chance to meet them prior to. But I want to spare the time for the rest of the council members to not have to sit through 3 hours of interviews when in reality our say really doesn't occur much. You know, it's really that liaison, because they know that board. I would not want to overstep my boundaries and say, hey, Councilmember Torgerson, this guy is perfect, he should be great for your board, and he isn't, or same for any other council member we have here. So I'd like to see the staff, the liaison, and I do like the video questions, but I do agree with Councilmember Buckland, they seem to be the same questions, so maybe if there were different questions, it'd be good to see, because some people are much more prepared for that interview than others. And the ones that are prepared more tend to do much better. But again, I'd like to just have a little bit more, I'd like to have a little bit more say on who is on those boards, especially if we're liaison to them.
Thank you, council members Buckland and Bongiovanni.
I can see doing that, but the only thing that concerns me is the statute requires that we vote in a public meeting here, all 7 of us. So we need to all know or have confidence in that liaison of who's being put into that position.
May I, sir?
Yes, Councilmember Torgerson.
I just wanted to note a couple. I was going to say that if I've got to vote on it, I should probably meet the gentleman or lady that's asking for the position. I do appreciate the idea of having the staff liaison involved in the process, maybe in the executive session process, not separately necessarily, but because there is a history before and after any council person, and they're also working with us. They may see something and they're involved in that process. So I actually, for once, do want to, that extra input. And the other thing is I don't want to cap that. If there's 4, to cap it at 6, because I know that during this process, that somebody that would have been capped off ended up being the best person. And we're talking 30 minutes of my time. I'm willing to give 30 minutes to get the best person. I'm not willing to cut down just to save a couple minutes. So I really don't want to cap the number of people at more than twice or less than twice. But having, let's say for the RDC, having somebody from Dan's office involved in the process, I would appreciate. I think it would be good to be able to have another person that's involved bounce off that.
Thank you, Councilmember Torgerson.
Vice Mayor.
Okay, I agree with what Councilmember Torgerson was saying. I don't want to cap that at 6 people if we should be doing 8. I like the process that we're doing there. I also, feel like the whole council needs to be involved, because if only the liaison is the one that makes that full choice, when I come up here and I haven't had an opinion in there, or maybe I did have an opinion, but it didn't matter, then I'm going to be voting no. And I think that could happen more, because if we're not properly involved, and I think this is a team thing, it's for the entire town. And I think we all need to be involved in this process. And I'm with Councilmember Torgerson. If it takes me an extra 30 minutes, an extra hour, then that's what it takes. But I just think that, and I respect each liaison's opinion of who's there and everything, but that is just that. It's their opinion, and they are there. Then perhaps maybe the council can be invited to a meeting, and we can come to one of those meetings and see how they're doing and how the other liaison is interacting with everyone. But I don't want to change the number of people we interview, because I agree definitely agree that sometimes the very last person we interview is the perfect person for the job. So that's where I am on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Buckley.
Other comments, questions? Just internally, I do know that a few years ago, this took a lot longer, at least internally with the council. We've streamlined it quite a bit over the last couple of years, and I'm pretty happy with the results we've had the last couple of years.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson. We're definitely hearing that the staff liaison input would be valuable, and there is some redundancy in the questions, a need for some efficiency and fine-tuning. But we definitely look forward, if there are no other questions, we definitely look forward to bringing you some more suggestions in the future. And we really appreciate your feedback.
Was this Ashley's first presentation?
Yeah, and I don't think
Did we get a word?
She did great.
She didn't have a challenge.
She didn't have a challenge word.
The whole thing was a challenge. But I thank you for allowing me to present to you this evening.
Did a very good job.
Thank you.
Limu Imu. Thank you. That concludes the study session agenda. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I second. There's somebody else.
Moved and seconded, we are adjourned.
How many minutes do we have? 5?
6:30.
Ooh, we got 35.
Yeah.